What does a healed dismissive avoidant actually look like on the other side of their healing journey? In today's video, I'm going to break that down for you in 5 major steps. And these are generally the 5 steps that dismissive avoidants take to heal and come out the other side. And my hope for you is that this is actually going to allow you to understand whether or not this person's healing that you know in your life, or that may be a friend or a family member, or maybe this is you watching as a dismissive avoidant attachment style. And of course, if you followed this channel for quite some time, this is not just coming from my own experience and the fact that my husband was dismissive avoidant and we did the work together to become secure pretty much 12 years ago. But the fact that I've worked with literally tens of thousands of people through online programs, through the personal development school, and then spending the better part of a decade even prior to that in private practice. What I will take you through are the biggest 5 pieces of what tends to happen when a dismissive avoidant starts healing, what it looks like, some things to look for along the way, because I think this is something people get so confused about and misrepresent. And then if you don't know what it's supposed to look like, you can't tell whether they're putting in work and it's working at all. So we're going to break it down. First thing is first. A lot of dismissive avoidants are doing the work, but not in the ways that you think. What I've noticed in my own sample size of working with people is through all the different individuals that come into the personal development school. And we can see this through our back end analytics, because people come into the school and they take an assessment and we can see who's which attachment style, and then they can track their progress. And so from people coming in to do the work, usually it's about 15 or 20% of people who are dismissive avoidant. And that actually mirrors very closely to what I first saw working in private practice for years before that, because I work a lot less with securely attached individuals. Since I tend to specialize in attachment theory and relationships, that leaves us with the other 80% being a combination of fearful avoidant and anxious attachment styles. Those are people actively doing the work, okay? Now, what this tells you is because when we actually look at the percent breakdown of which attachment style is which, you're usually seeing of the 50% of people who are insecurely attached, roughly 20 to 22% of them are anxious. The other 20 to 22.5% are dismissive avoidant, and the rest, that very small minority, are fearful avoidants. In other words, it tells us that obviously dismissive avoidants are less likely to go to counseling or come into different programs. And so we see that skew a little bit already. However, a lot of dismissive avoidants, when they do the work, are very diligent. They tend to complete the work. You can actually see in the back end of the personal development school by attachment style, the progress. Dismissive avoidants love to start things and complete them all the way through. Whereas other attachment styles tend to bounce around a little bit more in their secure healing program and things like that. The whole reason I'm telling you this is that dismissive avoidants, yes, they may plug in and do that work, but less of them are coming in to do the work in the traditional types of sense we would see. The vast majority of dismissive avoidants who plug in and do the work, they do the work by taking what their partner says, logically internalizing it, thinking about it, and showing up through their actions. So this is point number 1. This is one of the most potent things to be tracking. If you have a dismissive avoidant loved one and you say, okay, I need more consistency in our relationship, you may not see them be super expressive in that moment. Like, oh, I can see you need consistency. I'm sorry I wasn't doing that. I'll do that more. You'll see them take it almost like a neutral, pondering type of circumstance if they're listening. They might say, okay, that makes sense. I understand. And they kind of take it quite quietly. But when you look at their actions, the dismissive avoidants who are wanting to do the work, they show up. The next day, you'll see them text at the same time or make that phone call that they said they would. And when you communicate a need, if you're doing it in a healthy way, the first thing you're going to see is that they show up with their actions. And they tend to sort of pride themselves on that. In fact, a lot of dismissive avoidants that I would work with would say, yeah, well, I don't show up with my words. I think about if I can do something, and then if I'm going to, I show up in my actions. So one of the first signs that they're healing and coming out the other side is that when you express a need or something important to you, you see them actively plug in to do that specifically. Number 2, dismissive avoidants start becoming more flexible. They start trying to see you and hear you and understand where you're coming from and make compromises. And one of the things that you'll see in dismissive avoidants who are growing and healing, again, from doing the work in a traditional sense or in a non-traditional sense, just trying to grow themselves in the relationship with you, is that they start trying to consider you more. You can see them sometimes processing the feelings of the person they're in a relationship with, or asking questions and becoming curious about how an action or behavior may affect their partner. And you'll see this in your direct relationship if you see a dismissive avoidant say things like, okay, I was going to do this, but what do you then experience? Or what do you feel if I do that? Or, hey, and they may even ask it in a less vulnerable way, like, I was thinking of doing XYZ on the weekend. And what they're doing, and it's up to them to communicate a little more clearly, of course, but they're trying to drop something in to see how you're feeling or how you would experience that. And it is actually a very subtle form of consideration. Trust is very much built on considering other people's feelings. How do my actions and behaviors affect your feelings and your emotional experience? And instead of them saying, and you'll actually see quite a big shift in their statement when they're trying to be more flexible, instead of saying things like, I'm going to go do this for the weekend, they'll say, I was thinking of doing this on Saturday. And they'll kind of pause and wait. And what that's actually them doing is trying to be flexible, communicate, see your thoughts. They would do better. And I used to have to tell dismissive avoidant clients, hey, that's a great start. But you want to say, how do you feel about that? Or what is your plan? Or something that engages them in a more inclusive way. And that would be that sort of next step that they would take. So you see them become more flexible and considerate, okay? And these are sort of these buds. These are the early stages of them starting to show up. Then the third piece that you'll start to see, and it tends to, very much take place in this type of order as well, is you'll see them as they become more secure, start to talk a little bit more about needs. They'll ask you about your needs. They'll talk a little bit about their needs. They tend to do it at a very high level at first when they're beginning. They won't say, I need this. They'll say, I appreciate when this happens. Or, hey, thanks for doing XYZ. They think they're communicating their needs clearly, like clear as day. But to a lot of dismissive avoidants, they don't like to use the term needs. They like to think of these things, these exchanges and relationships as being preferences or exchanges. You actually hear them refer to them as at times. And so you'll hear some of these things where they start to communicate more. And that deepens in step 4 when they start to actually communicate through conflict. If there's a problem, and this is one of the biggest signs that, wow, we're really getting there towards being more securely attached, is when they start actually communicating about a conflict. And if there's a problem, they'll start initiating solving for it. Often in early stages, people with avoidance start to communicate with an avoidant, and they're always the one kind of initiating the solve and trying to be vulnerable and fix it and hash it out. And you'll see that table really turn to more of an even spread between both partners in relationships, where the dismissive avoidant may initiate trying to solve the conflict. Like, let's say there's a little bit of an eruption or a conflict and somebody makes a harsh comment and walks off. The dismissive avoidant may give it a beat and 5 minutes go approach the person and say, like, do you want to talk about it? And this is where they're literally starting to take not just the communication and deepen that communication into conflict resolution, to talk things through, to hash things out. And by this point in time, they're starting to get to this place where they can be vulnerable. They can express that they care. They can really open up. They'll start giving more compliments. Their communication really starts fine-tuning as they become more secure. And it becomes what you can expect from a healthy, normal relationship. Now, I still have one last piece. If you want to check out courses that help you recondition all of those painful stories that just go on in your mind and projections of all of these outcomes, we have a whole course you can check out fully for free for a limited time, all about what a secure and healthy relationship looks like. This is just available for a limited time, and I will put that link down below if you want to check it out further. The fifth thing you are going to see as a dismissive avoidant becomes securely attached is they start to actually co-regulate and be vulnerable on a regular basis. You'll see them say, oh, I had a hard day at work. Oh my gosh, today this thing happened and I'm not sure what to do about it. What do you think? And this is where they're entering into this fully normal level of vulnerability, of co-regulation. And honestly, one of the beautiful sides of this, and I can speak from, my own marriage, one of my things that I really genuinely appreciate about my husband so much is he really plugged it into the work to be secure in the early days of our relationship. And he is so grounded and consistent and reliable and just feels like such a safe, healthy place of support and like nourishment and consistency in my life. And so he'll be vulnerable, and he's also very grounded. And I love that. I appreciate that because it feels like a rock, right? And my rock. And it feels like that in a really beautiful way. So they'll keep these elements of themselves, because I would share with you what it's like on the other side. They keep these elements of that consistency and groundedness and practicality and strength. And then they also have this ability, this layer or level to them where they're vulnerable and they open up and they share feelings and they ask meaningful questions and become present and connect with you and know you and make you feel seen and known. And all of those things are so possible. But of course, the dismissive avoidant has to do some of that work too. So anyways, that's it for today. I hope that gives you a lot of context for things. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you next time.